Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Bryn Durgan, and I'm the Director of Programming for Bookstore One. Thank you. Welcome in. I know a lot of you have been to many of our programs before, so you know that we do a lot of programming. We have Spanish literary salons, writing workshops, storytelling workshops, book clubs, and author talks and signings like you'll see here tonight. If this is your first time in, then we hope that you will be back, because it wouldn't be possible to do events like this without readers like you. Also tonight wouldn't be possible if it weren't for, of course, Tom and Avni with New College's program in creative writing, so thank you for making that possible. And all the students who left campus to be here too. So now, before we introduce you to the author that you are here to see, I just want to remind everyone to take out their phones and make sure they are silenced. We are video recording this evening. And while you're doing that, I'll let you know a little bit of how this will go. I will introduce Tom, who will come up here and give a proper introduction to our author. Yes, there's plenty of seats on the other side as well. You don't be afraid to just walk on by.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get to it. Tom?
I'm Tom Bailey, and I'm professor of creative writing at New College. And I want to thank Brent for setting this up. In Georgia, where's Georgia? Thank you, Georgia. It's a beautiful bookstore. And we hope that we can partner for more events as we go forward. I met Andre Dubus III through his famous father, the master short story writer, Andre Dubus. I'd first read Andre Sr. while I was a grad student at the Iowa Writers Workshop, where Andre Dubus had also gone to school. The Pretty Girl, Anna, Rose, Killings, and unforgettably, A Father's Story, among many others. Andre Dubus Sr. instantly became my hero, and even back then, at the ripe old age of 23, I set my sights to try to write even half as well as him someday, with the same close care for my characters he had for his, and the sheer beauty of his writing, sentence to sentence, the lyric quality of his voice, and in his vision as a person of deep faith. And one of the biggest thrills of my life was when I got to meet my hero face to face. After Iowa, I'd gone on to the old school we used to call the State University of New York at Binghamton in upstate, where John Gardner taught before his tragic death in a motorcycle accident. And 4 years later, after receiving my PhD, I took my first real teaching job as a preceptor in the expository writing program at Harvard. It was there, at the Cambridge Public Library, during the question and answer session following his reading, that I heard Andre Sr. talk about how he was able to so deepen down in his understanding of his characters. Say a young woman like Polly in The Pretty Girl. I have to feel what a glass of beer feels like in her hand. As a budding would-be writer, that single line of advice had a profound effect on me and my own approach to writing about characters who were other. It wasn't about me, it was all about them, right down to how a glass of beer would feel in their hand. And it was the grace and guidance of that line, too, that allowed me to contact my hero directly to ask if he would write an essay called The Habit of Writing for a book I was putting together for Oxford University Press titled On Writing Short Stories. He agreed, and so we began. Soon my wife Sarah and I and our then young son Sam were driving up to Haverhill regular to have lunches and dinners with my hero. My older son Samuel, who is now at Harvard working on a PhD of his own, and who is swiftly becoming a nationally recognized writer, a poet in his own right, and who many of you know since he came to New College of Florida as a visiting writer this past fall. Andre Sr. was in a wheelchair, and we'd bring him to lunch or pack along dinners. In fact, one abiding memory I have of that time is of 2-year-old Sam taking his afternoon nap on the black satin sheets of Andre Sr.'s own bed, which he happily gave up to him while we sat around outside by the pool and talked. It was in those days and nights that I came to know my hero, not merely as a writer, but as a man. The day I met AD3, Andre Dubus III, his father had asked a bunch of friends and writers to help clean out a house they were fixing up for his daughter, Andre's older sister, Suzanne, was that it? Yeah. A few of us showed up. I remember I wore my Carhartt work suit, and a novelist named Fred and I carried bucket after bucket of rubble and debris out of the crawl space of a basement dumped outside. AD3 was there working too. He was doing the skilled labor job of laying tile in a bathroom. Here's what I remember from our first meeting. Andre had pecs. And a beautiful wife, Fontaine, and a young son named Austin, who I watched, I have this distinct memory of, who I watched Fontaine strap into a car seat in what I remember is maybe some kind of van. AD and I spoke again. I remember he asked me if I liked teaching at Harvard, and I believe I told him the truth, which was that I loved it. Now, this was before Andre wrote House of Sand and Fog, or most likely, he was busy writing it at the time in his truck in the graveyard. Before, as he likes to say, his ship came in. And Oprah blessed that fine book is one of her picks. When I was back at Binghamton, I'd read his collection, The Cage Keeper, which I greatly admired, and sometime soon after, his first novel, Bluesman, which I still think is a knockout. It was a fortuitous meeting, a fated meeting, if you will, and AD and I and our family soon became close. They visited us and we them. And later, after his father died, the night of his death, my wife had spoken to Andre Sr. on the phone about what to bring to dinner at his house we were set to go to the next night. It may well be that she was the last person who spoke to him before he got in the shower, where they found him the next morning. AD and I sat in my truck at the foot of the pasture in Annisquam in Gloucester, swapping a handle of wild turkey back and forth, drinking straight from the bottle. And I told him how much I missed his dad and how empty and meager my loss, God darn it, was compared to his, to him who'd lost his father. And AD turned to me and said, "Don't let my pain get in the way of your pain. You love the old man too." I did love him. But I love AD3. He has a beautiful soul. And he's a hell of a writer. He is my hero too.
Oh man. Tom Bailey has pecs too. I think I'm going to do a very brief reading and then I'll go over there. Is that good if you guys see me, hear me, and all that? First, I want to thank Bryn and Georgia. I want to say something because a lot of people don't talk about Amazon enough. I despise Amazon. If I need a prosthetic leg, I will not buy it from Jeff Bezos. And I want to share with you a stat a lot of people don't know. Before Amazon came along, there were over 20,000 independently owned bookstores in America. There are now 500. And he purposely put them out of business. So I have a website, like so many authors do. I do not even have an Amazon tab on my website because you can't buy it on my... Anyway, so thank you for being to this bookstore. Applause. And good night. My favorite part of getting up in front of people is I love the conversation, so I'm not going to drone on, but I'm going to read 2 brief essays. My latest book is a collection of personal essays, which I came about accidentally, the way most of my life has been, divine cosmic accident. It takes me 3 to 5 years to write a novel, and And that doesn't mean that they're going to be any good, but I'm slow. And then I'll finish something, and then I feel compelled to just write about my life directly and straight, experiences. You look at the word to remember. We tend to think in day to day the opposite of remember is forget, and it is. I forgot where I put my keys. I remember where I put my keys. But you know what the etymological root opposite of remember is? Chop, 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 dismember. And so the act of memory is reaching for the shards, reaching for the pieces. And so for me, that's what the essay is. I'll just have this, we all do. I think everybody in this room probably has slivers of images from your life floating around. And it's not even the dramatic ones. The way the light hit the side of your grandmother's face when you're sick, sitting on the porch. Or your dog's tail wagging as he goes off into the snow. So I follow those images and these essays come out. And this book's called Ghost Dogs on Killers and Kin, and I'm just going to read two very short essays. If you speak French, you know that the word essay comes from essayer, to try or to attempt. And I love that, and I tell my students that at UMass because it's very gentle, really. You're just attempting to try to make sense of something with words. And with the personal essay, I'm attempting to make sense of some of my experience. So I'm going to read you two short essays, and let's have a conversation. This one's called Shelter, and it's all nonfiction. This is The I Is Me. You guys can hear me if I'm right here? Okay. It was the coldest winter in New England in over 100 years, and we were framing my house in the snow. For over 30 days straight, the wind chill was below zero. And most mornings, my younger brother Jeb and I and our friend Jim would spend over an hour just shoveling off the job site so we could set up our cutting station, oil and load our nail guns, and light the propane heater to get the compressor warm enough to run. Most days, I'd have to chisel off the decks just so he could snap a line for the toe plates of walls. I grew a beard to keep my face warm. Why not wait till spring? Because I bought these 2 acres of land over 3 years earlier, and it had taken us that long to get all the necessary permits in place. Because for the past 9 years, my wife and I have been raising our 3 children in a vinyl-sided half-house that was small and dark and cluttered with toys and the second-hand furniture we owned. Because since my own birth 43 years earlier, I'd lived in over 24 rented houses and apartments, had always had a landlord, some threatening my single mother with eviction, some threatening me. And now, for the very first time, I had money in the bank, a lot of it, all from a novel I'd written over 4 years in my parked car. And because, well, I just couldn't wait. At first, there was the desire to get the whole project started and done with. Like most writers, for years I've been hoping for a time when I could give my entire day to writing and reading. Now, after over 20 years of daily labor, I could finally do just that. My agent kept calling to ask why I wasn't hiring somebody to build my house. Don't you want to write another novel? I did, of course, but for the kind of house we wanted to build, an in-law apartment for my wife's aging parents, a bedroom for each of our children, and one for us, it would just be too expensive to hire a builder when I had the skills to do it myself. I estimated I could cut costs in half, an accurate estimate, it turned out. But part of me didn't want to do it at all. Wasn't a house just another material object anyway? Did we really need to own one? Did anybody? But this ambivalence began to dissipate the week after our permits were approved. It was a cold Sunday in November, the sky gray, the air heavy with future snow. 2 days earlier, my foundation contractor had poured our footings, and he told me they'd cure better if I kept them warm. So that morning, I drove to a local farm in my pickup and bought a dozen hay bales, drove to my wooded lot, tossed them off, then used a pitchfork to spread hay over concrete, my concrete, poured in the shape of my house on my land. It took us over 2 years. Every day I'd pull up to the site at 7 a.m., the smells of sawdust and pine pitch in the air, those lovely naked 2x6 walls standing plumb level and square, and I'd buckle on my leather carpentry belt of tools and work alongside my brother and my friend, and later with a new carpenter I'd hired too. That spring the snows melted, but it brought some of the heaviest rains in 50 years, and we hung massive tarps to work under. By early that summer, the four of us were roofing my house during a heat wave. I should have put this in, but the carpenter said, "What's next, locusts?" When it came time to cover the exterior walls with cedar shingles, my wife Fontaine, a modern dancer who used to make a living upholstering furniture, spent 2 months nailing up over half of them while I did the rest. I hired my 67-year-old mother to paint the corner boards, the soffits and fascia, the window and door casings. While my wife had a fear of heights, my mother had none. There were electricians and plumbers on the job now, and every hour or so I'd pause in my work and glance up to see my mother standing on the scaffolding 40 feet in the air, squinting in the sun as she brushed paint onto the trim of my house. I remembered the doctor we rented a house from when I was 12, a tall man with thick glasses who stood at our door in his coat and tie and asked that our mother leave and take us 4 kids to live in the projects. I remembered over the years all the scrappy places we lived in that somebody else had owned. Painting my big new homemade house, my mother looked so happy, and it made me happy seeing that. The truth is, except for those moments of unspeakable grace holding our 3 newborn children, I've never been happier than when I was building for us this house. One late afternoon, a cold rain starting to fall, I stood on a plank outside my daughter's second-story bedroom, trying to finish the shingles around her window. The sun was down and the plank was getting slippery, and a small voice inside me said to quit now and head home. But I no longer felt that where we lived was home. And as I fit a shingle into place up against my daughter's window, this motion felt like something else, though I did not at first know what it was. Then I did. It was just like pulling the covers up to my daughter's chin right after she fell asleep. It was like doing that with her 2 brothers, too. It was like closing their bedroom door and tiptoeing down the hall. It was like locking the front and back doors and checking the windows and turning off the lights. It was like holding them as babies and wanting my arms to be a shelter for them and never wanting to let go. Thanks, guys. So I was asked by a magazine editor if I'd be willing to write an essay on love to a child. I said, well, to a boy. Would I write a letter to a boy about love? I said, well, can I write a letter to my 2 grown sons about love? And he said, yeah. So the very original title of this essay is A Letter to My 2 Sons on Love. My beautiful sons, you're young men now, 33 and 28, and you're both more perceptive than I ever was, especially when I was your age and older, when I was full of rage. So because you are, both of you, smarter and more whole than I was, you probably won't be surprised to hear that the notion of truly loving someone and being loved back terrified me. The first time I ever went to a therapist, I was 24 or 25. This was in my hometown, her office not far from the Y, where I lifted weights and hit the heavy bag and kept myself ready for the next fight. A block or 2 south was the convenience store with cracked front windows and mostly empty shelves that everybody, even the cops, knew was a front for bookies and drug dealers. Across from it was a laundromat where young mothers washed the clothes of the kids they let run wild through the streets. And to the north was the park where the drunks slept on the ground in the summer on a hill overlooking the Merrimack River. The lady who became my therapist for the next few weeks seemed old to me then, though she was only in her early 60s. She had a lined face and wore cardigan sweaters and skirts and nylons. Her eyes were gray but warm. She asked me why I'd come to her, and I wasn't sure. It wasn't because I couldn't stop looking for victimizers to victimize and once almost beat one to death and nearly got beaten to death myself. It wasn't because I saw the world as a dark place or that I expected disaster at every turn. It was because more than one girlfriend had said to me in various ways, "You don't let me love you." It was true. I would much rather do the loving, the rescuing, the tending to than have it done to me. But as I explained to that smart, kind woman in her small office so many years ago, I knew that if I surrendered to love, that I would die. And then this image came to me, a clear glass of warm water and a dissolvable tablet. The water represented the sort of love required of me, the kind where you open your heart fully to the other. The tablet was me. This young man who still remembered as a boy his mother crying herself to sleep in the weeks after his father drove away. This young man who couldn't get all the fighting out of his head. His mother and father throwing things at each other, swearing, screaming, slamming doors. This young man who watched his still beautiful young mother date man after man after man and asked very few of them to stick around. This young man who, like his brother and sisters, felt tossed out on his own. We human beings are all a multitudinous mystery, so I reject the notion that it was my childhood alone that formed me into a hard tablet who wanted no part of a glass of water, who would rather love than be loved, who would rather hug a woman with one arm because he had to keep the other free to ward off the danger that was surely coming. I don't remember what my therapist said to me about this image, but as it hung in the air between us, I knew I did not like what it revealed about me, that I did not trust the good things in this life, that I would rather not love, as the wise saying goes, than lose and hurt again. Then I met your future mother. When I first saw her, she was doing that thing that made her her. She was dancing on stage and I was in the audience and I could not take my eyes off her. I was drawn not so much to her physical beauty as to the power she exuded as she moved, as if she needed no one, like the world was hard, yes, but dance. Then months later, meeting her for the first time, I found myself sitting next to her in the back seat of my friend's car on a 4-hour drive south to New York City. I was heading there to do a reading with your grandfather. She was heading there to visit a friend and to dance. I hadn't slept much the night before, and she was getting over the flu. And so we both lay our heads on the seats and talked quietly to one another. And the thing is, as I looked into her brown eyes, as I listened to her talk of wanting only to dance and to draw, I recognized her from long, long ago, from before I was born. On our first date together, lunch where I was so nervous I ate only salad, I had to keep looking away from her because tumbling down through my head was this sentence, "God, that's my wife." I'd never wanted a wife. I never wanted marriage, and I sure as hell wasn't looking for one. But when I was in the presence of this strong, creative, and beautiful young woman, it was like hearing once again the strains of an ancient music. And I knew I was supposed to move to it, to join myself to it, whether I wanted to or not. I could have proposed to her that very day, but my fears began to stalk me like the gang of young men years earlier who cruised the streets looking for me for weeks. Then a cold February night, 10 months after we'd met, I finally got down on one knee and asked her to marry me. She punched me in the shoulder and said, "What took you so long?" That night was 37 joyous years ago. All the way to our June wedding, I vacillated between hope and black terror. What good could ever come from marriage? What could ever come from love but pain and loss and an acute loneliness? But whenever I was with your future mother, the parts of me I was ashamed of, my lack of faith, my short fuse for bad behavior of any kind, felt smaller around her. And the parts of me that I was not ashamed of, my desire to create art, my tendency to feel compassion for others, felt larger. By opening myself to her love of me, I was opening myself to also loving the boy whom I had stopped loving to protect myself from it all. Then I was stepping into that terror the same way I learned to square off with a man who had every intention of doing me harm. On a hot, cloudless day in early summer, your mother and I vowed to love one another in her Greek Orthodox church in front of 250 people who loved us, including my mother and father, who had gone on to love other people a few times over, yet still loved one another, hugging and kissing and teasing each other whenever they could. And my sons, it is my love for this one woman all these years that has carried me into some eternal village of spirits where I have not died, but lived far more fully and acutely than I would have otherwise. And it never would have happened if I had not surrendered to the deep and terrifying and exalting mystery of love. You see where I'm from. How are you? Is this on? How are you? So my wife didn't read this. So there are like, I think 19 essays in this book, and they were culled from like 40 essays I'd written over 30 years. And so she's reading it for the first time as a book. She's, we're lying next to each other in bed. I'm reading my book. She's reading this book. She turned to me, she says, "Honey, these are so personal." Well, yeah, honey, they're personal essays. They're personal. Anyway, what's on your mind? How are you? I have loved, so there are a lot of students in this room. I have loved my 2 days with these creative writing students at the new college. And Tom Bailey, my dear friend, thank you for inviting me. I'll call on you. I'm a teacher. Yeah, I could say things. I could talk. Should I talk? Well, I talked to the students today for, hour and a half we talked, whatever. And we're talking about the self-doubt that happens when you're trying to create art with words. And I told them how much I hated the word author, because it sounds so hoity-toity and kind of elitist. And I'm already stuck with that damn Roman numeral 3 on my name, and people always think I'm a rich boy, and I grew up poor with a single mother in a friggin' mill town. And but then I looked it up. I like the word writer better because it seemed to more accurately capture the labor. Hemingway called it the sweet labor of writing. But then I looked up the word author, and when I discovered its archaic meaning, now I really like it. Because it means the originator or beginner of something. And it takes nerve to originate or begin something. So then I told them about, I want to share this with you, those of you who weren't there, because it's Albert Camus' wisdom. He said there are 5 things you need to be a writer. And the first 3 are the things you hear, talent, work ethic, diligence, and perseverance. The 4th one was interesting, outdoor exercise. But then the last one, he said, that your most essential thing you need is black doubt, massive self-doubt. So we talked about that. Samuel Beckett has this wonderful expression. He says, ever tried, ever failed, never mind, try again, fail better. So it takes nerve, and I think that many writers make the mistake of asking writing to make them feel good, because it's my time, I'm being creative with words, but I think if you're going deeply enough into it, you don't feel good. Because it's about pursuing truth, and truth is often really uncomfortable. And so I think it's really important that writers take care of themselves, go down to free fall into your psyche, and then do something healthy. I do think that's, and I'm not romanticizing alcoholism, but I think that the reason so many writers over the years were heavy drinkers is they're anesthetizing the rawness of where the writing took them. But now we have massage, gymnasiums, yoga, aromatherapy. I'm going to call on someone. Denise, what's on your mind?
So when you were writing like your first novel, right? So you don't get paid to write a book before you write it, right? So what was it that you did to live while you were doing this?
Yeah, well, the truth is, and I've talked to some of the students about that. If you're going to be in the arts, whether you're an actor, writer, bass player, painter, you've got to have another job. the majority of people never get paid for their work, and that's okay. So very early, I haven't thought about this in a long time. Denise, thank you. I semi-consciously decided, so I got a degree in sociology and political science at University of Texas at Austin. So I should tell you, I mean, if you haven't read my memoir, Tony, you don't have to have read anything I've written, but when I talk about fighting and stuff, I grew up in these mill towns. My parents divorced when I was 9. All my family was Louisiana. My mother, my father, everybody. But I grew up north of Boston, we talk, I guess. But they were born in Louisiana. My mother gets pregnant at 17 or 18 and elopes with my future dad. He's 20. She goes to her father and says that she's doing this. He said, well, there ain't, and he never went past 3rd grade. My grandfather is a pipe fitter. He said, well, there's never been no damn divorces in this family. And if this don't work out, you ain't coming home. So 9 years and 4 kids later, it did not work out. They split up. And I watched something happen to my mother that I'm sure you've seen in your life. They had all of these friends, but they were mainly the friends from my dad's job teaching at a college. By the way, this is late 60s. He was making $7,000 a year, 7, which is a lot more in the 60s than now, but for a family of 6, that wasn't much. So now he leaves, and all the friends go with him. And my mother is 27. She got 4 kids. She's never gone to college. She doesn't have a job. And for the first few days, we had no car. So she did what millions of women do. She did it. She got a job as a nurse's aide and a waitress. She worked her way through college, got money where the big money, got a degree where the big money is in social services. And we moved 2 to 3 times a year for cheaper rent. And I was a small kid, and I read books. And I quickly learned if I walked down the street with my glasses on with a book in my hand, I would get beat up. So I actually stopped reading for years. That was because it made me a target. And, you know, I'd be sitting, this is Haverhill, Massachusetts, the Merrimack River. If you know that area, it runs west to east into the Atlantic Ocean. Mass New Hampshire border, Lawrence, Lowell where Jack Kerouac's from. If you've seen the movie The Fighter with Mark Wahlberg, it's, you know, Irish Mickey Awards from Lowell. I grew up in these towns, and they're really depressed, dead mill towns. And my high school, Haverhill High School, had the 7th worst drug problem in the nation in the 70s. And U.S. News and World Reports did a write-up of 283 cities of this size, and our town came in number 283rd. And the local cops actually made up their own bumper stickers. We're not number 283, we're number 1. I'm like 12, 13 years old thinking, why point out the 283? Just say you're number 1. Anyway, I go to the, you know, it was a scary school, 2,500 kids. It was poor, you know, kids fell through the cracks. My sisters and brother and I would miss 60, 80 days a year because we didn't like going, and we'd never get a notice home. And you know, I'd be sitting on the bus stop on the rare days I went, where this is the early 70s, so Vietnam generation has moved on, but we all look like it. So I've got hair to my waist, I'm wearing a leather jacket, I'm trying to fit in, but you know, everyone's passing a joint around and whiskey. It's like 7 in the morning, we're 14. And I remember this local drug dealer who died years ago, they're all dead. So my name is Andre Dubus, where I grew up, Andre Dubus, or Doofus. Hey Dubus, you want to hit off this joint? And actually said, not necessarily. Boom! Punch me in the face. I said, why did I say necessarily? So, you know, I can look back with some comedy sometimes, but the truth is, even now, all these years later, thinking about my childhood in that mill town, I still have 2 predominant emotions. One is self-loathing, because I hated myself, because I was a physical coward. I was scared, and I would get picked on or beat on, and I just didn't do anything. And the other was just physical fear. And years later, in 1989, we do not as a culture talk about the Tiananmen Square massacre. Right? It's a world crime. We don't talk about it. I don't think we ever should have gone to the Beijing Olympics. If you recall, and my Chinese students have insisted it never happened because it's been excised from their history. Does that sound familiar? It was called fake news by the dictators. That's exactly what it was called. Young protesters, young progressive students in China are trying to protest for some changes in the dictatorship. Dictatorship puts up with it for a few weeks, calls in the troops, and mows them down. A British war correspondent described the scene in the New York Times the summer I got married to Fontaine. It was 1989. And he describes that the leader was this 23-year-old charismatic kid. The troops are approaching, and they're the same age as the college kids. They're just the sons of the farmers in the provinces. Shoot this kid to death. The kid's girlfriend, who's also one of the leaders, screams at the soldier, her age, why? And he shoots her to death. And I'm reading this crying. And it got me thinking about innocence. I said, she was still innocent. So it seems to me that we lose our innocence. One sure symptom of it is we stop asking why to brutality. We just, here it is, again. And we either fight like hell or run like hell or what have you. So I will condense, but to the jobs. So I'm actually answering Denise's question about jobs. One day I snapped. A grown man beat up my little 13-year-old brother, and I couldn't defend my brother. In fact, if you know violence yourself, and I pray you don't, there are 3 general reactions. You either fight like hell, you run like hell, or you freeze. I always froze. I froze and thinking, why is he being mean to me? I wasn't mean to him. I was always trying to rationalize brutality. So my younger brother's beaten up by a 20-year-old, 190-pound military policeman home on leave, beats him senseless. My mother, who was always gone 14 hours a day working down in Boston, she's home because she has the flu. She comes running out in her nightgown, picks up a stick, and I'm standing there frozen. I begged him to not hit my brother anymore. He threatened to kill me, so I was frozen again, waiting for it to be over. She comes out and starts to beat on him. He calls her the worst thing you can call a woman. I won't repeat it. And I, her oldest son, did nothing, just stood there frozen. It eventually is over. My brother's getting attended to in the house, and I'm standing outside my house. I'm 14 years old. And I don't know if I stood there for half an hour or 5 minutes, but I went into my house, the rented house my mother could not afford. I go into the downstairs bathroom, I look in the mirror at my 14-year-old face, and I say, I don't care if you die anymore. I don't care if you get shot, stabbed, beaten to death. You are never going to not fight back ever again. And I started to do push-ups. I got 3. I think I was telling this class. I got like 6 sit-ups. But 6 months later, I could do 1,000 sit-ups, hundreds of push-ups. I started to box, and I became a vigilante. I became a hater of bullies, and I went looking for them. And if I found a guy hitting his wife, I'd put him in the hospital, and went on and on. I knew I was on a very dangerous road. I wrote all about this in that memoir, Tony. And what saved me was discovering creative writing. But before I get to that, answering your question, see, I'm 2/3 Scotch Irish. I can't shut the hell up. I go get a degree in sociology and political science in UT Austin, and my hatred of neighborhood bullies is a hatred of many forms of capitalism, is a hatred of racism and homophobia and misogyny and imperialism and colonialism. And now I am going to go back home, and then I'm going to prepare for a PhD in Marxist social science, and I'm going to go to law school, then I'm going to run for president, and I'll be president when I'm 45, and I'll change the world from the top down. That was my plan. And then I discovered writing, Denise. And I couldn't not do it. There's a wonderful line from the writer Thomas Williams. He was asked late in his life, "Hey, Mr. Williams, why do you write?" I said, "Oh, that's easy. I write so that I don't die before I'm dead." Isn't that great? And I quickly discovered that was me. And I know already some of you young writers probably feel that already. So I made the semi-conscious decision, Denise, I am not going to get a real job. I'm a college graduate. I can get jobs with money and status and climb some ladder. But then I won't write anymore. Maybe I'll write on the weekends, and then I'll just, I'll have my house and my car. So I took jobs I didn't want to keep. So I cleaned toilets with this lovely lesbian lady. We were house cleaners. And I really took a toothbrush to those toilet seats of other people's pubic hair. I did that. I worked in halfway houses for depressed teens and also convicted felons. I did that. They were all night jobs. And this is actually in this book, Ghost Dogs. I actually was an assistant private investigator and bounty hunter who went to Mexico looking for a contract killer for one of the 5 crime families. I had a fake name. Because my cut of the bounty, if we caught him, was $25,000. That was my yaddo. I could go right for a year. So I did that. And I tended bar, and got into carpentry, and 20 years. But I wrote every day, 5-6 days a week. And the best job, and I tell my students, you guys, I think too many people live their lives making decisions because they're thinking about the Thanksgiving dinner that may never come with the aunt who asks them what they do. Well, I'm in law school, Auntie. Well, they don't freaking want to go to law school. So I have students who, they get their MFA or their BA and they have student loans, and what, I'm gonna go work at a 99 because it's good for my writing? Yeah, go work at the 99. And I think too many say, well, I can't do that. My aunt's gonna ask me what I'm doing with my college degree. So I worked as a bartender for 10 years. And after 20 years of this, and about 5, I wrote probably 4 books before the real one, the one that took off was my 3rd published book. I probably written 7 books. 2 got published, the 3rd took off. After being rejected 24 times over 3 years, and then it just took off and became a huge bestseller. Then it got Oprah-fied and became even more of a seller, and then it became a movie, and I'm talking to Ben Kingsley and Jennifer Connelly in a bar, and I'm in Europe on a book tour, and I had money, I had friggin' money, and the first thing I did, I go to my mom, who never had a car with less than 250,000 miles on it. I printed out these pictures of cars to say, Mom, what do you like? Oh, are you guys getting a car? I said, no, you are. No, I said, yeah, you're gonna get a car. So her eyes fill up. She said, I can't. So, well, if you don't, I'm gonna go pick one. So we go down. So once in my youth, we lived in this horrible house in this really tough town, and the windows were painted shut. It was a slum. The landlord never came. It didn't have a lock on the front door. Twice drunks would come in from the local bar and pee on the foyer. And it had gnats or fleas. And my mother and I slept outside on a summer night in some car. I don't think we even owned it. And I remember her falling asleep so fast because she always worked so hard. And she'd fall asleep so fast, and she's in the front seat, falling asleep, and I'm in the back seat. And the whole drive down to the car dealership, I was that 11-year-old boy. And I walk into the dealership, so I'm not gonna buy from her, I'm gonna buy from her. And what did my mom from Louisiana pick out? A candy red double cab Toyota Tacoma pickup truck. Anyway, I did all that, and then I started teaching, and I love teaching. That's a long answer, Denise. Okay, good. You have to have context. What else is on? Who's mine? Somebody, yes. What's your name?
Bubba.
Hey, Bubba.
Hey, you mentioned you answered part of this, but do you have books that you wrote that were earlier and you never solved them, or they weren't that great, and
Yep.
now they're in a drawer? Will you go back to them, or have
Yeah.
you moved on?
That's great, man. Did you guys hear Bubba's question? You go back to them. I should go back to them, but I don't go. I'm gonna now. Because I write longhand pencil. I write longhand pencil, man. Me composition notebooks, and I've got hundreds of notebooks. I was telling the students today about how failure is really important. How failure is your friend. I don't think you can be a creative artist, maybe even a mathematician or human, without making friends with failure. It's just, you only learn from it. And I spent almost 3 years on a novel, Bubba. And a lot of it was based on growing up in Milltown with a single mom and the violence and crap. And I didn't tell you guys this today. The reason why, and it failed miserably, and the reason, why it failed miserably? Because I was still too mad at my childhood. I felt sorry for me. I was angry at my parents before a lot of therapy. And every time the guy who was the father came out, I made him 10 times worse than my father ever was. My father was great, he just was not there. My mother, I made her look worse. And then the little boy, Dean Woodson, me, oh, I made you just love that little guy. It was so dishonest. So the writer Richard Yates said, if you're going to write about your life, you have to walk a fine line between self-aggrandizement and self-pity. And I was going on both sides. But Bubba, the only thing worth a damn in that pile of pages, it took almost 3 years of my life, was a sliver of an image of one of my dear friends who was stabbed to death at 25. Just of him, riding the back, rich kids ski, poor kids ride the back of cars with on the snowy ground. And that image gave birth to an essay. It was really the first essay I wrote. So failure's good. It just hurts your feelings and your self-esteem. What else is on your mind? Hey, Madeline.
Hi.
Hi.
So this is kind of related to the last question, but how do you know when an idea in creative writing is worth pursuing or it's not?
Oh, great. How do you know when an idea in creative writing is worth pursuing or not? I mean, for me, were you at the class today?
I had a midterm at that time.
Where the heck were you, Madeline? I'm kidding.
I had a midterm.
No, you know what I found myself saying to your classmates is, I think anything is worth pursuing if you're curious about it. You know, and I do think that's the most helpful fuel for any creative writer is trust what you're curious about. If you're curious about a situation and a certain kind of person in it, and you can't stop thinking about it or starting to see it, just write your way into it. Don't prematurely evaluate it. Don't second guess it. So it's all valuable if you care. And I think one way you care is you're curious about it. What were you going to say? What's your name? Have I met you? You look so familiar. Hi, Barb.
Hi. So having not known your background, your upbringing, and everything you've just shared tonight, and I just finished Such Kindness, is there any connection to that
Thanks
book
for
or
reading it.
any of your other books that connect to the characters and your upbringing and your family and that?
Yeah. Well, thanks for reading that. Well, you didn't say that out loud. I'm kidding. She liked it. She's my sister. I bring her to every reading. Did you hear Barb? You hear Barb's question?
No.
So she just read my most recent novel is called Such Kindness, and she's asking, are there people in your books that come from real life and that kind of thing? Well, yes and no. Yeah, circumstances. Yeah, well, let's talk about that because it speaks to, Madeline, to your question about how do you know when you got something you should continue with. And Tom and I have talked about this a lot for years. Is the writer Willa Cather says, a writer is at her best only when writing within the character and range of her deepest sympathies. Isn't that beautiful? When writing within the character and range of her deepest sympathies. What does that mean? You just have to care. Well, what's going to make you care? It's a mystery. But often I have found that what I keep writing about in fiction anyway haunts me, or comes right from a wound that won't go away. I mean, many great writers have said you write one story over and over again, which is fine. So, I just lost my little brother last year, my brother Jeff, and it was awful. He died of many things. He was young, 64. And he left 4 kids behind, and his life was always hard. In the novel Such Kindness, in the opening scenes, from the point of view of a guy named Tom Lowe, he was a builder, fell off a roof, got really injured, got addicted to painkillers, really bad, lost his house, lost his marriage, is estranged from his son. And in the opening pages of this cheerful little novel, his car's been towed, and he's living in subsidized housing. So my brother, for the last years of his life, lived in subsidized housing. And my sisters and I have, wonderful material success and, comfortable upper middle class lives. And the guilt of having the contrast between us. And I helped him as much as I could in all sorts of ways. And then after a while, it became clear, what is helping? Am I really helping him by giving him money? So it's a whole nother issue. But I was visiting him one day, and let me just say, my brother was a genius. He was the genius in my family. He taught himself how to play classical guitar, Bach preludes, by listening to Segovia albums in his room on his record player when he was 12 and 13 years old. He designed my house, and he's not an architect, and I had to bring it to a structural engineer, and they didn't fix one thing. On and on. So I went to visit him one day, bring him coffee. We live 10 miles away. And there's this tiny little depressing subsidized unit, and surrounded with art books and guitars and Segovia albums and the cultured life he was from. And then from next door comes this young woman. She's got 3 or 4 kids from 3 or 4 different guys. I don't say that with judgment, just observing. She's wearing a hoodie and pajama bottoms, and she's coming to bum some cigarettes. His name is Jeb, but he also went by John. Johnny, you got a cigarette, honey? I'm freaking out. And Jeb and I grew up with them. We grew up with poor white people. And And so I'm just sitting, and I couldn't get over the contrast between this young woman and this man, your father's age. And we chat, shoot the shit for a while, and then I have to leave, so I leave. And the whole way I'm driving back, so we grew up first world poor. I watched a mother, she's either gonna pay the rent on time or we're gonna have heat, not at the same time. Either gonna have enough gas to get into the car to go to work in Boston, or we're gonna have groceries, not at the same time, on and on. So we grew up that way, and driving away from my brother living in poverty, I mean, he had his own disability and he was okay. I just felt the terror of, and this is true for all of us, all I have to do is get sick, get hurt, lose my job. I could be right there in that unit. I could fall right back down that mountain. When I was writing that book, Such Kindness, I read this stat, which you may know, but it's shocking. Nearly 80% of all American families have no more than $400 in the bank in case of an emergency. $400. My mother never had more than $40. So, Barb, I was terrorized. And then I thought, I've been a self-employed carpenter for years and I've always had back issues. What if my writing never took off? What if I never became a professor? And, that's a job where you get paid even if you're sick. I used to work jobs, if you were sick, you went to work because you didn't get paid. What if I was still a carpenter? And that gave birth to that whole novel. And so all of our lives are through it, but nobody in that book is remotely like anyone in my life. Just my friggin' terrors. Does that make sense? Yes, libertad.
So you were talking about how one of the things that was difficult for you to write came from this idea of bitterness towards things that made things difficult. Do you think writing would be better, or maybe you should wait to write after therapy and after feeling like a healthier person, and then you'll be able to write?
Yeah, that's a great. You hear a question? Yeah. So if you're writing from wounds or bitterness, would it be better for your writing if you got a bunch of therapy and were more whole before you started to write? I say no, but I also don't romanticize this notion, which is kind of like last century thought of, well, I can't get healthy. There goes, if I lose my demons and I lose my angels too, I think that's crap. We are human beings, we write from our core, but no, I think there's great value to writing from the shadow and writing from pain and writing from dysfunction. Henry Miller, the novelist, said, oh God, I'm gonna kill what he said. Basically, he said, writing for me is expressing a wound, like squeezing it till the pus comes out to make me more human. So there's great value to that. But also, I know so many writers now, and many of them come from whole and loving families, and their work is full of shadow, full of trouble. It's just part of the human condition. We're talking, D.H. Lawrence has this great line. He says, it is not I who write. It's not I who writes, but the wind that blows through me. Mm-hmm. So I think in many ways, the writer's circumstances are irrelevant. Yeah, what's your name?
Demi.
Oh, Demi, yeah.
Yeah, so you talked a lot earlier, earlier today and yesterday about your process and your day-to-day, rhythm and what helps you do your craft the best. And I'm kind of wondering, to what extent do you use other art forms like movies or music or painting, sculpting, not doing them but just observing, to help?
Yeah, you hear Demi's question? Other art forms. Yeah, first my wife's a dancer, choreographer, painter. She even writes well, and we talk a lot about all our artist friends who might be famous for acting maybe or painting, but they're also good at drawing and music. It's almost like if you got the habit of art, it's in you. So man, I just love music. And when I was writing my novel, House of Sand and Fog, before writing from the point of view of the Iranian main character, I would listen to Persian music. It brought me into a dream state. I read poetry every morning, but I don't write poetry. I've been reading it every morning for decades. Can I give you a poem?
Yes.
It's a very short poem by William Stafford. It's called Yes. It could happen at any time. Tornado, earthquake, Armageddon. It could happen. Or sunshine, love, salvation. It could, That is why we look out. No guarantees in this life, but some bonuses. Like morning, like right now, like noon, like evening. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah. Yeah, poetry. I feel like I should get one or two more. I mean, I could keep going, but I don't want to keep you guys up all night. Lily, yeah.
So I'm curious how you research your characters. How do you step into another character and still make it feel real and true, even when their experience is so different from your own?
Did you hear a question? So how do you research characters and make them so real and true? I don't know if I've done it, but I always try. And I do think that, and Tom and I talk about this a lot, that if the act of writing fiction is nothing else, it's an act of sustained empathy, where you're asking, well, what's it like to be you? In order to do that, we talked about this a little bit today, you've got to let go of you. The writer, Philip Lopate, said, look, if you're going to write about yourself, you better avoid the stench of the ego. Isn't that great? And I think that's the way to go. So, but let's talk about research. So I do research. As soon as I write myself into an area of human experience I'm ignorant about, I go interview cops and cardiologists and sex workers, but I don't ever ask psychological questions. So I've got a novel set in this right here in Sarasota called The Garden of Lost Days, and one of the main characters is a stripper. And I didn't know about strippers, and so I interviewed one and asked her a bunch of questions like, well, how much do you make? And, you know, well, if you're naked all night, where do you put the cash? Oh, we have a locker out back. Out back? Who else is out back? The house mother? What's a house mother? Well, usually a retired stripper who watches our kids. You bring your kids to work? Which gave me my first scene. I said, what do you do, excuse me, if you're having your period? Oh, we just stick the string in. Okay, well, and then how much do you have to make a... They make all the money. All the money. So you got the door charge. They've got to pay the bouncers a cut of their tips. They have to pay the DJ. They have to pay the bartenders. They have to pay the waitresses, and they have to rent the space they're dancing on. So they gotta make $2,000 a night to walk home with $800. So it was very fascinating. But I found, Lily, I never asked, and I interviewed a few other dancers. I never asked, how's it feel to spread your naked legs open for a bunch of drunk businessmen from Ohio? And the reason I didn't ask is I want to go there myself. I'm not a woman, but I'm a human. I can imagine. And so for me, I do that research. The what's, as Hemingway said, but not the whys. Because I want to find that out myself. Yes, Mike, this is your store.
Yeah, I want to be sure that we have time for the signing
Okay.
downstairs. So I don't know if you want to take one more question before
Yeah,
we do
what's your
that.
name?
Christina, are you pointing at me?
Yes.
Christina, kind of two parts. I have a question I like to ask writers, which is there a story you would like to have written that you can't write yourself? But also, because you were here with the students, or do you have any nuggets you shared with them that you could share with the writers in the audience?
Gosh. So the question was,
Nuggets?
is there something I've written something I haven't written that I don't know if I can?
A story you would like to read that you can't write?
Yeah, how about a happy one? That would be friggin' nice. So my novel that made me an 18-year overnight success called House in Santa Fog, it's a tragedy, man. It's terribly dark. And I wrote it during the happiest time of my life, having our kids, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm doing a reading like near Boston, and this middle-aged, well, she's probably in her 70s, middle-aged to me now. She says, excuse me, sir. Yeah. Are you sick? I said, no, I feel good taking my vitamins. No, I mean, like, are you mentally ill? Seriously. I said, I don't know, why do you ask? Oh, because you're like a friggin' stand-up comedian, and your books make me want to kill myself. You have a split personality. You know. What I found myself saying to the students, I keep saying to young writers and not so young writers, is to really trust what you're curious about, as I was saying to Madeline. I'll give you an image. I'll leave with an image. It's a beautiful image from, remember James Jones, From Here to Eternity? James Jones is the first big World War II novel. He wrote it while serving in the South Pacific in the Army. And he would get up, he mainly had KP duty. He'd peeled like 800 potatoes a day, but he got up at like 3 or 4 in the morning and he wrote. And he hid from his soldier buddies in the barracks that he was a creative writer. Why did he hide it from them? 1943. Because he didn't want them to think he was what? A homosexual. Because, you know, real men aren't creative writers. And so he had to put up with that crap and other crap. And so, but here's the image I want to leave you with. Well, I'm going to say so I hate the digital world. I love the internet, but I hate the handheld gadget. I've never sent a text. I don't have an iPhone. I never will. I've never been on social media. I don't know what an emoji or meme is. I can't get a goddamn Uber, never mind a menu. Because I hate what it's done. I hate what it's done to people's attention spans. I hate what it's done to people's families. I hate what it's done to marriages. I will never own one, and I despise what Silicon Valley does. And don't get me started on AI. So, you got to protect this gift you've been given at birth from the mysteries. And here's the image that George Garrett, and we'll end with this. He said, so James Jones learned to hold his talent inside of him like warm water between two cupped hands. Isn't that beautiful? Thank you all.
Thank you all.
The signing will be downstairs near the cash register. Books are down there to purchase if you don't already have them, and we have books by Tom and Avni down there also. So take advantage of all of that, and thank you for coming. Thank you.
George, you want me to turn this off? Want me to turn this off?
Just